Hello and welcome to the Blockchain and Us, where pioneers and thought leaders talk about their journey in blockchain technology, crypto assets, and the token economy. And I'm your host, Manuel Staggers. If you enjoy this podcast, please give it a top rating and review on iTunes, and feel free to follow me on Twitter at Manuel Staggers. This episode has support from Shift Cryptosecurity, the maker of Bitbox, a minimalist hardware wallet for cryptocurrencies. Bitbox is rock solid, compact, portable, easy to use, and designed and manufactured in Switzerland. To learn more and get your wallet today, visit www.shiftcrypto.ch. My guest today is Jonas Schnelli. Jonas is a Bitcoin core developer, the co-founder of Shift Cryptosecurity, and arguably one of the most trusted people in Bitcoin. He is a core maintainer and blockchain expert, and one of the few people in the world with commit access to the Bitcoin code base. And now, to the interview. Hi Jonas, and many thanks for making time for this conversation.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Jonas, I read in an article on CoinDesk that your focus is making Bitcoin Core more user-friendly for non-geeks. So first off, with Bitcoin Core, what exactly do you mean?
Yes. So when I initially started to contribute a couple of years ago, I had the idea to make it more user-friendly. I still follow that approach. Although at the beginning, I thought it's just like, increasing the size of the font and changing some icons. But I had to figure out for a mass adoption or for user friendliness, there's a lot more involved that even goes down to the protocol level, like things, why do we have addresses, things like that. So I'm still working on it, although it sounds trivial to work on the user friendliness. I had to figure out it's very complex and it goes down to the deepest level of how Bitcoin works.
Mm-hmm. But Bitcoin and Bitcoin Core, is there a difference?
Well, when I started in 2013 with my first contribution, it was just named Bitcoin. There was Bitcoin, and then people figured out there is like the protocol level, there is a software implementation. And at one point, we rebranded Bitcoin into Bitcoin Core to make it more obvious that there is a protocol, which is like independent from the implementation or the software. And Bitcoin Core is the reference implementation, which usually or before was named Bitcoin. So we kind of made a base for other implementations to make it more easy for them to kind of name them and not be something on top of Bitcoin. So more like standing next to Bitcoin Core. Although till now there is still the market is still very dominated by Bitcoin Core.
Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin Core is basically like the operating system of the Bitcoin protocol. Is that correct?
It's maybe seen as one of the operating systems how to run Bitcoin or how to run on top of the Bitcoin protocol. Mm-hmm. But since Bitcoin is mainly a consensus protocol, and consensus is very hard on a technical level, there are bugs in Bitcoin Core which are part of the consensus protocol. So to kind of rebuild Bitcoin Core in a new way, you also need to implement bugs, and there it gets pretty messy. And I think it's hard to re-implement the consensus logic outside of Bitcoin Core because of that reason.
You mean bugs, like as in software bugs, or?
Yeah, there is some bugs in the consensus layer, or there maybe are even bugs we don't know of. Mm-hmm. If you kind of re-implement everything from the scratch, you may miss one of these bugs, and we maybe don't know this bug, and suddenly you creating an altcoin, or there's a fork in the chain because your implementation acts differently than Bitcoin Core. It's very complex to re-implement or to implement consensus in general. And ideally, we can break out the consensus part out of Bitcoin Core as a software specification, as a running software, and this can be used in other implementations.
On GitHub, I see there's a little bit over 500 contributors and over 17,000 updates to the code as of now. But there's also a smaller set of core developers, and you're one of them. So how does this ecosystem of core developers and contributors, how does that work?
In general, it's an open source project. That means everyone can join. There's no group who can say you are allowed to do changes and you are not. So it's fully open. It's not a closed group. And the process, we use GitHub, as a lot of current open source projects do. So whenever one or you has an idea to improve Bitcoin on a level of on a protocol level, or GitHub then is used for an implementation level, you can make a proposal. You can actually write code, do that proposal publicly, which GitHub is public. And then there is discussion about that particular change. And nobody can say, I don't like you. That's why we're not going to merge that. Because if I would say that, I would make myself like, I would act badly. And people would say, okay, he just rejected a proposal because of emotions. And then I would probably lose my maintainer rights. And at the end, nobody will nobody will no longer trust my opinions. That's kind of the self-balance that's there.
Right, but still, there's the core developer group.
Yeah, that's a good question of definition. I know of people who has contributed a few times on a level of documentation plus a little bit of code, and then they're free to say, I'm a core developer. I'm a Bitcoin Core developer, which is, yeah, maybe right, maybe not. I don't think it really matters to kind of find the term. At the end, there is very active core contributors, and then there is like this group of 500 who includes the guy who changed an S to a lowercase s because of a typo in the comments. But I think at the end, it's probably 10 to 12 very active contributors since years. And it's the same people since years, usually, or more or less.
And that's about 12 or 15, I believe?
Yeah, I would say 10 to 15. I would need to count it, but I would say 10 to 15.
What exactly is their job? I mean, you said a guy sometimes maybe just, add, change the spelling of something that doesn't really matter. But with the core developers, are they contributing most of those updates, or how exactly does that work?
If you say job, that's already, I would say, a misconception, because it's open source. You can join, you can work as long or as much as you like. Then the question comes down: what's your what's your motivation behind doing a contribution? And then there is no clear definition of what Bitcoin is or should be in the future. So it's like the more contributors we have in direction A, the more obvious or likely will it be that Bitcoin moves in direction A. That's kind of there's no central planning or things like that.
So it's flat, and you guys vote on things, and it's just the best idea wins, kind of like that. Yeah, although we need to distinct between the levels. There is the consensus level, where you can say the 21 million Bitcoin cap is a consensus thing. These things are not discussed on the development part of Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core is the reference implementation. Whenever we touch the consensus logic, like SegWit or block size increase, that stuff is usually discussed on the mailing list, which is called Bitcoin Dev mailing list, or where I'd say it's 2,000 or 3,000 people who are signed up for that mailing list. That's the protocol level main discussion infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Where people may say, we need to increase the block size, that would be discussed there.
Yeah, and if one comes up on GitHub, on Bitcoin Core's implementation, look, we need to increase the block size, and that maybe actually brings up co-contribution that would do that, we refer to, no, this needs to be first discussed on that mailing list before actually implementation will happen. Every consensus change will need go through the Bitcoin approval process first before implementation will happen.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's always this question of who controls an open source project, right? And I mean, I heard this discussion recently with Ethereum, where it was, you know, the person said, oh, it's the community's doing everything. But you know, the interviewer kept drilling down and kept asking, yeah, but who exactly makes the decision and who has final call and all that? I mean, do you guys also debate things like these?
Yeah, I think one advantage Bitcoin has over other cryptocurrencies, there is no clear leadership structure. Satoshi disappeared, which I'm glad he did, because it gives a more neutral base for discussions. If he would still be here, people would maybe follow his decision just because it's him, not because his arguments. And with the disappearing of Satoshi, we are stuck with, we need to discuss stuff based on arguments rather than leadership. But still, there are some people who did great contributions in the past. They have some forms of leadership influence, but not to a level where we could compare it to Vitalik for Ethereum or other cryptocurrencies. And I think that's a really, really great thing. And how do we discuss things? Usually that's we have the policy that everything needs to be public. We don't do any closed group discussions. There is no closed communication channel. We of the more core-ish group of Bitcoin would discuss in. It's all public, so everyone is free to join. Whenever somebody starts to communicate with me in a private channel on IRC or Signal or WhatsApp, I usually tend to tell him, let's take this public, because it's just a policy that everyone feels strongly about it. And then on GitHub, there's a lot of discussions, and it's all public. You know, it's important that it is public, and at the end, things will get merged when there is public consensus. And what means public? That means whoever starts to contribute on Bitcoin Core with a comment with, I like this, I don't like this because of that reason, is part of that process of defining what change will be merged or not. So I think we really are open source believers, all of the contributors, and I think we do it pretty in a good way. And that's how we work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Cool. I mean, I understand. I also saw, I mean, obviously, right, there were issues where there was no agreement in the past, and where it was just not possible to reconcile different ideas. And also I read something that you said there. You said, if we start fighting and disagree on the very deepest technical layer, we hurt Bitcoin in its core and will lose trust from the markets. So does that still exist?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would say that again today, although, I mean, disagreement on the protocol level, like we had with the hard fork, with the block size increase, will either lead to stagnation, so nothing will happen, or it will lead to a fork like we have seen with Bitcoin Cash. And maybe that's how disagreement will kind of form then into the market. I think it's just the way how consensus disagreement happens, and it's probably okay. Although the question is how much it did hurt the market, the trust in general in cryptocurrencies. If it would not have been better to stick, kind of make an agreement on a disagreement, come together, form a single piece, and have trust from the market with the long-term perspective that cryptocurrencies can survive. But it's hard to say whether A or B is better or true.
Mm-hmm. But why was it not possible to agree there?
I think because there's no definition of Bitcoin or no master plan of Bitcoin. So people have IDs A, other people have IDs B. They may be contradicted IDs, and not possible to do both. So, yeah.
So one group said Satoshi really meant to do this, and the other group said no, he meant to do that.
I guess it's hard to say what he meant, especially for things he hasn't mentioned really, or more concrete. And it's probably goes beyond that. It's people build systems that need to scale or need to make progress, and to make progress they need something on the protocol level, which could hurt other businesses. This is a general problem in open source. So there is probably the origin of the fight or the disagreement, and the hard fork is very likely about that, or the block size increase.
Okay. I mean, that was highly criticized, right? I mean, how that whole argument happened. And some people I spoke to, they even said, you know, Bitcoin has become kind of stale a little bit. I mean, do you hear that criticism as well?
Yeah, I heard it in the past. A lot of criticism were happening in 2017, like the Ivory Tower, Bitcoin Core controls A and B. And I think maybe first let's focus on the first thing I just mentioned, that Bitcoin Core contributors or developers control Bitcoin. This is one misconception that was floating around. And for that, it's very easy for me to kind of say, like there were big companies claiming that Bitcoin Core is kind of, or Bitcoin is defined by Bitcoin Core, but these companies have never made attempt to contribute to Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core is not an organization. It's fully open. If you comment or bring up proposal with technical, with like reasonable technical approaches, there's nobody who can say, oh, I don't like company A or B. That's why we reject it. That would make us obviously bad. So I think a lot of these companies who brought up criticism have never made attempts to contribute to Bitcoin Core, and that's really not understandable from my perspective. How can you criticize something where the doors are open to join and be part of it? Maybe it's easier to just criticize and then do your own controlled thing. Yeah. And then B is, I forgot the question. What was the question?
The question was, you know, that some people I speak with, you know, they say Bitcoin has become boring. Let's move on to something else, right? And But maybe I wanted to follow up first with that other thing that you said, because I think it's very a good point that you mentioned. I mean, there was always this whole debate where, you know, some people said, oh, you know, it's block streams controlling Bitcoin Core.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's a really big misconception. I could never follow these arguments, and I know it looked like obvious on the surface, but people did not take time to really kind of dig down and see that this argument is not really an argument, because it is an open source project. Everybody is free to join. You can even, you just need to make a proposal, and then there's a discussion about it. It's a full, open, transparent process. Mm-hmm. Of course, people who will criticize your argument are people who are for years in Bitcoin, but still, it's an open debate. It's an open process, and there is no company behind Bitcoin Core. There's nobody holding rights to the name of Bitcoin Core. It's an open source project. And criticizing an open source project for me means you have failed to be part of it. And if you have failed to be part of it, then the only thing you can do is be part of it. Start to contribute, start to help, start to write documentation or code. Mm-hmm. And I could understand why bigger companies started to criticize. I'm happy to explain that. I mean, if you build a company like in the size of Coinbase or BitPay, you have a lot of money requirements. You need investors. You need to have a good business plan. You need growth curves. You need to have magnitudes of user scale per year. And what happens if you can't provide to these investors that we have now 10 times more users than we had last year? You need to point out why you don't have these mass adoption. And it's probably very easy to tell them, look, these guys have not increased the block size, so we don't have more users because the space is limited and users need to pay extraordinary fees, and that's why we don't have these 10 times more users now. This could be one reason. I'm not sure. I won't say this is the true. I don't want to say this is the true, but it could be part of why people started to criticize on that level.
Mm-hmm. So basically it didn't grow fast enough. They couldn't scale their business that they built on the promise, that they maybe promised some investors about Bitcoin, and then they couldn't follow up. So they needed to point fingers. Is that what you're saying?
It could be true. I am also invested. I'm also involved in one of these startups, and I know Bitcoin scales and improves very slow. We sometimes think Bitcoin moves fast. It's true on one hand. On the other hand, it's very slow. It's now since a couple of years, and it's a very slow involvement of things. And I think that's correct. That's good for technical stability. On the other hand, it's hard for startups to work in a way where investors are supposed to or are investing in things that kind of rapidly evolve.
Mm-hmm. So they just went and made their own coin.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Bitcoin Cash situation, it's hard for me to say why and what's the long-term perspective of it. I think it came out of that disagreement. And from the current today's perspective, the survival chance of Bitcoin Cash, the use case of Bitcoin Cash, I really don't see where are the benefits, or what is the benefit of Bitcoin Cash over Bitcoin, the core coin, or those, I should never say the core coin because that's evil. But Bitcoin, the Bitcoin coin, what's the advantage of Bitcoin Cash, and also what's the advantage over other already existing altcoins?
Well, they would say it scales faster. It's, easier. It has lower transaction costs. There's a promise of mass adoption. That's the arguments that they use.
These arguments have been used 100 times in other altcoins, especially Ethereum, one of the first bigger altcoins that was born exactly out of the same reasons. And all the arguments you just mentioned, I would say it's true for Ethereum as well. Maybe no longer, but then you can say it's used, Litecoin has the same properties then. Why use Bitcoin Cash over Litecoin?
Yeah, right. It is an open debate, and I think it's interesting to kind of, try to understand what's behind it. What is your view on, maybe a developer who says, the way Bitcoin evolves is a little bit too slow. I'd rather just work on other coins that I feel are a better version of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's nobody's tied to working on coin A or B. I also feel it's slow. It's not very fun how fast things or how slow things evolve. Mm-hmm. I would wish it goes much faster. But it's just how it is. It's very fragile. It's hard to do it in a way where we can securely scale. But that's just how it will survive decades. I think what we see now in Ethereum, how it somehow implodes, is actually results of how it maybe scaled too fast. I mean, the idea of Vitalik was he took Bitcoin and looked, how can I make it better? How can I make it, just better? How can I overhaul everything that's bad in Bitcoin? But not sure if it succeeds. It turns out that it fails, it implodes. And that's my take out of that it's very hard to create a cryptocurrency. And especially it's very hard if you have if you have a horizon of decades in your head, that it should survive.
You mean a horizon of decades? I mean, that's very little for a currency.
Yeah, you could even say if you have a horizon of centuries. But decades is already for people a lot of years. They usually think in, in 2 years, I want to be there, which in Bitcoin, you can maybe say in 10 years, we want to be there. Mm-hmm. And obviously, a lot of people think it will be the currency of the future that will survive centuries. But decades sounds more realistic and more acceptable to people.
Let's take a quick break for a message from our sponsors. Shift Cryptosecurity is the maker of Bitbox, a minimalist hardware wallet for cryptocurrencies. Storing your digital assets safely should be a priority, but software and phone wallets can't protect your assets from hackers and malware. The Bitbox can. Developed by a team of experts who combine Swiss pioneering spirit with a strong commitment to crypto security performance that is second to none, the Bitbox is rock solid, compact, portable, easy to use, and designed and manufactured in Switzerland. To learn more and get your wallet today, visit www.shiftcrypto.ch. So yeah, I mean, that's another thing I often heard where people said, it's not a bug or like a drawback of Bitcoin that the development is slow and that, we need consensus on everything. That's why, decisions aren't made so quickly. It's actually a feature that is very, very important for the stability.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Bitcoin was built to resist change. That's very, very important. Bitcoin was built to keep the consensus. The consensus, it was built to resist changes. So every change, even if you think it's a good change, it's hard to do because it was built to resist changes. That's how we started to trust the currency, because it was acting as we wanted. It was acting predictable, and changing it in its core levels on the consensus layer is just hard. And but it still happens, but very slow.
I mean, were you ever confronted with a choice, where you said, maybe you should also work on other projects that maybe move differently, or was that never an option for you?
No, I think I'm a technical person, so my perspective is very, very technical, not economical, and I think I spend hours per week to just understand things, and from a technical perspective and kind of a century approach, as I just mentioned, there was never a reason to look away from Bitcoin. So there was nothing on the horizon, even far away, that would attracted me and had similar properties than Bitcoin has.
So for you, it's Bitcoin and the other things aren't necessarily there to stay.
I think they're funny things or interesting things being created and like on an experimental level for my perspective, but like that long-term impact, I don't see that this could be possible in any other cryptocurrencies right now. Maybe something will be born soon, but from today's perspective, from the things I know, I only see kind of an impact possibility with Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Cool. That's also why maybe your focus on, making the project more user-friendly, right? And I want to get back to that a little bit. I mean, what exactly could be done now to attract more people to it and, just make it more user-friendly?
On a high level, it's for me what should be achievable. I know it sounds now very plain, but I think we should achieve that I can pay person B. I can pay you in an easy way, which is, it sounds maybe it's possible today. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, what I need like a very cryptic address from you in order to pay you, and then I need to enter that into a very strange application, and need to enter some strange number, and at the end you get like funded by me. So it's a very complex process right now, and my hopes are that paying people will be as easy as sending an email. This is very high level, and
but doesn't that exist yet? I thought, I mean, there were projects where you could use an email address to send Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there is PayPal. You can do that already. I forgot to mention that we should achieve that in a completely decentralized way. So there is nothing involved who can audit or censor that thing, because that's preconception of Bitcoin, which we always forget about it. But if that is not given, then we can use PayPal or Western Union. Everything is lost on the level of Bitcoin then.
Okay. So are you working on a project like this?
Yes. I mean, working on Bitcoin Core is, for me, working on that. I know it sounds now like, why? Of course, there's a lot of things involved until we get there. And this is just what I have in my back head. I'm not sure if we even can achieve that in a decentralized way, that I can pay you. What means you? Or can I also pay a machine? Things like that. It's very, very much on an experimental research level. And on the other hand, we're making concrete steps towards that ideal or dream. And this is just what I have in my back head. I want to in the end get a payment system where I can pay person B and nobody can censor me, and I can find that person and I can pay it immediately without no costs. That's the ideal form.
Why is that not possible yet? I mean, I could just, take my address and send it to you on Skype or Telegram, and then you could use it and enter it in your wallet and would send me the Bitcoins, right? I mean, that kind of works already. I understand it's kind of clunky and there's many steps involved, but why exactly is it not possible to do it easier at the moment? You just mentioned it. It's easy. It's not easy. It works. When I started to contribute, I had the same feeling. It works. I can pay you. I just need to get an address, and then I put in an amount, and you have the funds. How can we make it easier? I thought, okay, let's invest a month and make it easy. That was my initial approach. But there's so many things involved to make it easy in a decentralized way, because do it in a decentralized fashion is extremely hard. And but yeah, that's the things I'd like to work on, and it may take years, and maybe it never will be easy, but my dream is that it will be easy. But I mean, one thing is, I mean, sorry that I kind of drill down there a little bit, but I'm just interested in it. Is it an issue of the user interface, or is it a reliance still on the wallet structure, the way these work today, or what exactly is the problem there?
I think it's multiple layers. It's the whole secure channel of submitting an address. So if I need to pay an employer with Bitcoin, he can send me an address, right? And I can pay him. But then the question comes, is the address who he sent me really his address? Did he send it to me in on a secure channel? Who controls that channel? Could it be possible that the hacker did change the address? So I'm going to pay the hacker, and I will have no possibility to get my money back. So easy, yes, but easy and secure, that's the hard part. And well, while I pay someone with a standard wire transfer, I can call the bank the day later and tell the bank, oh, look, I made a mistake. And there's a high chance they will revert the funds. While in Bitcoin, this is not possible. So it's extremely important that easy and secure is given. And right now, easy may be possible, but without secure. And without decentralized. You just mentioned I can send you an address over Telegram.
Right.
If everyone would do that, which means then Telegram is a central player in how addresses will be shared. So they control the funds. They can change the address and be an important part in destroying Bitcoin. or the whole payment network. So
they could make a software that detects somebody enters an address and then always exchange that with their own address, for example.
Theoretically, yeah. And as soon as there's a central player in how people how people interact addresses, then there's a central risk. So maybe it's not. Maybe then the question then comes again up: why do we even have addresses or things like that? Which then goes pretty much theoretically.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm just, and that's why I ask all these silly questions. Just so, sometimes I also understand better what the problems are if I, just keep asking.
I think it's really important. It's not obvious. Also, I can make another example. It's not so obvious that we are not there where we want to be. Imagine you want to hold Bitcoins. You are just now an enthusiast. You want to hold maybe $10,000 in Bitcoins. So the process to really achieve that in a good way is very hard, because maybe you start with the phone wallet, with the smartphone wallet, which actually means the funds are controlled by your phone manufacturer. So if I would start using iOS as my $10,000 wallet, and we all know iOS is controlled by that single app store, and automatic updates are usually enabled, which means Apple controls my funds. If I'm really honest, they can upload a binary, they can move away my funds. So it's technically very obvious that Apple can move my funds if they want, which is like losing the idea which Bitcoin follows, this censor-resistant, decentralized currency. And so then you probably would say, okay, let's use a hardware wallet. And then it's very hard to set up the process right. It's so complex. If you write down the wrong word, your funds may be lost forever. If you click the wrong button, the funds may be sent to the wrong person, and that's then immutable, which is just the whole set of how you might need to be prepared for is different. And there's no fail-safe process with hardware wallets. It's very complex. It's very easy to make a mistake. The wrong backup can lead to funds lost forever in the millions. So we're not there. That's what I need to underline here.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the hardware wallet, and you're working on a company that makes hardware wallets.
Right.
I mean, is that for that reason? Was that the motivation to bring in, additional layer of security?
Yes. I mean, one main reason why I started to co-found this company was because there's just Ledger and Trezor which are dominating the market, which is again a centralization risk. So if these companies would work together, or if an attacker would go after these two companies, it's again hard. Mm-hmm. Also, I think the market is ready for multiple companies exactly for that reason. And I think key management is one of the central things for cryptocurrencies. And it's one of the things that maybe always be very hard, and maybe will be the neck-breaking thing for cryptocurrencies. And I think we need to focus on key management to allow mass adoption.
Mm-hmm. And the hardware wallet will enable that?
Maybe, I'm not sure. It's hard to say. For now, it's probably one of the securest ways how to manage cryptocurrencies. Mm-hmm. Maybe will not be the only way, but right now it feels like an additional hardware layer is a way to explore, maybe the way to go in the future. And I think it's something we need to research more, but right now it seems the hardware is important.
I'm wondering how, at the very beginning, how did you get in touch with Bitcoin?
That was in 2011, I think. Yeah, when a friend came to me, and he was at Web Tuesday or something like that, and he told me, "Did you heard of that Bitcoin thing?" And I thought, okay, yeah, tell me a bit about it. I've never heard about it. And then he started to explain it to me, and I thought, okay, this is the next bullshit of the internet. But then actually it hooked somehow on me, and I started to read about it. And the more I read, the more I started to, oh wow, this is actually cool stuff. And And of course, I started to play with Bitcoin at that in this time, and then in 2013, I thought, okay, now it's probably time to work more on that because they need developers. I can do things, and let's see if it matches together.
Mm-hmm. So that's about 2 years from you thinking it's some hoax on the internet to actually understanding that it's useful?
No, I think I understood earlier, but that was the moment in 2013 was the moment where I thought, okay, I actively need to support.
Yeah, got it. What was the argument for you that tipped it over, from this is maybe, just something on the internet to, oh, this has legs? What was that argument?
One thing that made me more read into it was obviously the exchange rate, who looked promising. Like, okay, people somehow trust these things. Mm-hmm. Why? Let me read a bit more about why they trust in it, and then I started to read and started to understand the technology better, and from the technological perspective, it made really sense. How important, next to the technology, is the idea, the ideology behind it for you? It plays an important role because I spent a lot of, I would say, months or even years working on it without getting paid. Mm-hmm. And in order to do that, there must be some level of personal kind of attachment. And I think, I don't know what it is actually, but something makes me very convinced that it's a good thing on a philosophical level. Mm-hmm. I mean, how much time do you spend with Bitcoin of your day? It's my job. Yeah, I'd say I work like a couple of, well, my normal week is not 8 to 5 and not Monday to Friday, but I'd say I work a lot for Bitcoin Core and the whole Bitcoin protocol. I'm wondering, are there any funds available for people who do that? I mean, up to that level, there's 500 contributors on GitHub. There's these 10 to 15 core developers. I mean, is there any, financial support for their work? I think there's a lot of money available right now for people who want to work on the Bitcoin protocol or on Bitcoin Core. There's not enough talents, so talents is probably the bottleneck. There's a lot of companies who are making money with Bitcoin, like the miners, the exchanges, and they are very likely considering investing into the infrastructure, so it's into Bitcoin Core or into the Bitcoin protocol. Even blockchain.info recently hired a guy who are working full time on Bitcoin Core, and I think that's how the bigger companies should do. And regardless of that situation, there's funds and companies are willing to take you now if you want to contribute to Bitcoin Core. Mm-hmm. Or Bitcoin protocol. Is there ever a conflict of interest? I mean, with an open source project, but then still there's corporate funding behind it? It's similar than Linux is. IBM and Red Hat, all these companies, they have paid development for Linux, but it's still an open source project. So I don't think there's conflict of interest. It's just, there's always, open source means you need to have a kind of what direction do you want to work? For me, it's like the usability thing. Mm-hmm. So the question is, do you get, are you able to find funding for that particular thing you want to achieve? Or will that bias thing you want to achieve? And how are you? I mean, have you ever been confronted with a question like this? I'm taking funds from a very controversial Bitcoin company, and which are completely not following the ideological thing I have with Bitcoin in mind. So I'm confronted a lot with that question, although I think for me it's ideal because I can take, I get sponsored by a company who would maybe, I'm probably not taking away sponsorship from more pro Bitcoin Core-ish funds that can now be attached by other developers or talents.
Interesting. So basically you work there is that like a project you're working on that has nothing to do with Bitcoin, or did they hire you to work on Bitcoin, or how exactly does that work?
No, in my situation, it's just that I had contributed to Bitcoin Core for a couple of years, and then the company, it's Bitmain, they contacted me if I'm looking for funds to continue my work, if they can sponsor me, and because I know I can do more if I get paid for it, I accepted it with kind of the thing that I can do whatever I want to do, and that was given, and so it's okay. I was also in the process of talk closer with the MIT for funding of my Bitcoin Core work, which then I thought it's probably better I get funded by a controversial player, so the slot that MIT can fund is open for someone else. So that was my reason to decide for that.
Okay, cool. And Bitmain is the Chinese mining company that's creating most of the mining machines, right?
Yeah, they're a very controversial mining player. And so far, I had a very good relationship with them, which is like not we don't discuss on a level of what's a good or bad change for Bitcoin. They are also a big driver behind Bitcoin Cash, which is something Bitcoin Cash is something I see as another good invention. So, but we were they are Chinese people. They think like in centuries rather than U.S. companies. They think more in years. They're very aware of how important work on the core level is, and that's why they know they need to pay for that in some positions.
So they just want the whole ecosystem succeed, and that's why they're doing that.
Yeah, I think they're pretty aware of they need to stabilize Bitcoin development on any front they can. And I think regardless of their attempts to create other altcoins and influence development in other ways, I think they're also aware they need to kind of put money into a level where they make money out of it, which is like they make a lot of money with mining and getting the Coinbase coins.
Interesting. Leaves you to wonder if you can always maintain your independence. I have the same criticism with my things, right? This podcast is also sponsored by companies, but still, they don't tell me who I can interview and who I don't. So
yeah, I think I would immediately quit if I would get any signal that would lead me to you cannot do this or that, is something like that, I would immediately quit. If I cannot stand up or keep my independence, I would have to quit. And also, my work is 100% public. Everybody can follow what I'm doing. And I think people would quickly figure out kind of signals if I would be no longer independent in any form.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Do you see cryptocurrencies and the idea of decentralization? Do you see this as a kind of a revolution that you're part of?
Yeah, I think it's a revolution. Of course, there's also question marks if it will stand or stay. I'm pretty sure it will, and I think especially cryptocurrencies, which is kind of implies the decentralization. That's a revolution, in my opinion. Yes.
Where do you see that ecosystem? Where do you see that going in the coming years?
I still think it will evolve slow, but it will grow and grow slowly, and at one point it will have an impact on how we pay daily.
And what
the question is just when.
Okay, and what does that mean for the Swiss franc and US dollars?
It's hard to say. As I said, I'm not an economist, so it's hard for me to predict any market exchange rates and things like that. On a technical level, it makes extremely sense to me, because when I pay someone in US dollars, or I recently had to pay one guy in Indonesia, it would have been faster and not way more expensive than if I had booked a flight and take cash with me. And the same fact happens for the US. So if I pay someone in the US with dollars, it takes more time than I'm booking a flight and flying over and handing over the money in cash, which is like a technical base point that something is not going very well there.
So you'd like to see an economy where it's all based on Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency and without fiat money?
I think fiat is still here to stay for a bit longer. But I think cryptocurrencies, as the internet in how we read and act, will take an important part in our daily life.
What if, imagine, Satoshi had never written that white paper and there was no Bitcoin and no altcoins and no blockchain. What do you think would you be doing?
Maybe it's the same, because I think it was now Satoshi, but the ideas were floating around since years before. Milton Friedman had predicted it in the 90s that something like this will pop up. The cypherpunks were working on it since years before Satoshi wrote the paper. Maybe very likely the same. But who knows? Maybe I would kind of sit in a monastery somewhere. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Cool. That was really fantastic insight into how you work and how Bitcoin works and where you see the whole space going. I really enjoyed it. And thanks a lot, Jonas, for taking time today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks so much for joining us today. More info on our guests and our sponsors is in the show notes of this episode and on the podcast website, theblockchainandus.com. To help people find this podcast, it's important that you download, subscribe, and give it a top rating and review on iTunes or on the podcast platform of your choice. I'm Manuel Staggers, and I thank you very much for listening.